Nuremberg. Hello!
Hello!
Bonjour. Just want to make sure that everybody's included. Salam, namaste, kalispila. Just want to make sure that everybody's included. Konnichiwa! I can't do the accent. I just want to make sure. I just very much want to make sure everybody is included. Heil Hitler! I just want to make sure that everybody is included. But of course you don't hear that one so much now these days, do you? I mean, it used to be big, didn't it? In its day. Very much the Gangnam style of its era. But now not so much. Heil Hitler, someone would say. Heil Hitler, you'd say back. I mean, I used to hear it a lot as a kid, you know? But then I did watch a lot of Hello Hello. Now, Hello Hello, if you don't know it, was the classic, smutty British sitcom of the 1980s, filled with lots of lascivious, leering, dirty old men, played by elderly British character actors, and a bevy of sexy French waitresses, played by elderly British character actors. All set against the backdrop of the Nazi occupation of France. Hilarious. All set against the backdrop of the Nazi occupation of France. Now I'm thinking, even at the first production meeting, they may have anticipated some issues with tone. Okay, we've got the new Saturday evening tea time sitcom ready to go. Just to choose from the 3 remaining settings still available to us: the sausage factory, the fudge packing warehouse, or the backdrop of Nazi-occupied France. Now, of course, when you do set your sitcom against the backdrop of Nazi-occupied France, you rule out quite a lot of the little tricks that we like to play with the classic British sitcom. You know, the holiday special, it's normally the Christmas special, isn't it? Where you take the familiar cast of characters and transport them to an unfamiliar location, like Auschwitz. And the reunion special, of course, the reunion special where a few years later the old gang get back together and the sexy French waitresses are dragged down to the town square and have their heads shaved for collaborating with the enemy. And of course, the real hallmark of success is, for any British TV show now, is of course the foreign remake. And it's very difficult to imagine how Hello Hello would have made it as an international franchise. And I suppose you could have set it against the backdrop of the Rwandan genocide. So you keep the French accents. In a way. But of course nobody would watch that. Well, they would watch it, they just wouldn't do anything about it. Bit of early satire there for you, ladies and gentlemen. And of course I know what I'm doing there is I'm missing the point. I'm missing the point, because the point of Hello Hello, the thing that we all loved, was the catchphrases. All the classic catchphrases, good moaning, I shall say this only once, and of course, Heil Hitler, the best one. Now I've done quite a lot of research for this show, and it might surprise you to know that in fact the phrase Heil Hitler doesn't originally come from the 1980s British sitcom Hello Hello. No, this is true. It was in fact originally a lot more associated with Hitler and the Nazis. Now, say what you like about the makers of Hello Hello stealing a dead man's catchphrase. But they clearly knew when they were onto a good thing, you know. Although obviously not all the actors in Hello Hello did use the classic line. If you study the online fan forums as closely as I have, you'll know that there's a persistent rumour among Alawites, as fans of Hello Hello aren't known. The actor Sam Kelly, of course, famously doesn't use the classic catchphrase. Sam Kelly, of course, who played Captain Hans Gearing throughout seasons 1 to 3 of A Lower Low, as you know. Now, the rumour goes, of course, that as a Jewish actor, Sam Kelly thought that would be disrespectful to his ancestors to use those particular words. Which, of course, tells you something interesting, doesn't it, about people on the internet and their opinions. Because there are people who fervently believe that a man will happily dress as a Nazi, pretend to be a Nazi, and earn his living for 3 years pretending to be a Nazi, but he's got to draw the line somewhere. You know? That's it. He's an actor, for God's sake. But again, it's an interesting viewpoint. I think we have to understand, why would you? Why would you not want to dress as a Nazi? Because they just had the better brand identity, didn't they? I mean, a little example for you. Back in the Second World War, when Britain nationalised the soft drinks industry, looking to concentrate on something a little more total war than total refreshment, they concentrated all production on one product, which they called SDI. In a classic leap of the British bureaucratic imagination, stood for soft drinks industry. Thirst-quenching SDI. They could at least have called it STD. At least that suggests something more of an active lifestyle. But no. Now the Germans, of course, had Fanta. Heil Hitler. And if you're wondering, it's this sequence that allows me to claim that this is physical theatre when I file my arts funding application later in the year. Now, of course, I understand, of course, that a lot of people take against Hitler because he portrayed the Jews as an uncultured race who controlled the world's media. And of course, we now know that that's the Australians. Well, there's one respect, I think. We have to admire his courage. Just in this one area, perhaps, because it takes a big man, doesn't it? It takes a big man to think he can top hello as a standard greeting. Now, this is one of the things that fascinates me about history, is the idea that there has to be a first time for everything. Because you see it in the sitcoms, in the movies, Heil Hitler, they say. It seems obvious, it seems inevitable. But of course, there has to be a first time for everything. Which is why I'd like to take you back, ladies and gentlemen, if I can, to the Munich of 1923, to the Burger Braukeller, to the time when Adolf Hitler has to break that idea to his mates for the very first time. Now imagine it if you can. Cramped, airless basement under a pub. A disparate group of misfits watching a man with a stupid moustache rant his opinions about history. Imagine it if you can. And as the meeting draws to a close, the chairman of the Nazi Party, Anton Drexler, addresses the room. Right, well, I think that about wraps it up for this meeting of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Now, diary's out, and let's see when we can all get together again next week. Unless there are any questions, of course. Apart from the Jewish one, obviously. Still no definitive answer on that one as yet. Oh yes, a question from our leader. Go ahead, Adolf.
It's more a point of order, really.
Well, God knows we all love a bit of order around here.
I was just thinking, that bit at the beginning of all our meetings when you say thanks very much for coming and did you get here all right?
I always think it's best to check.
Yeah. And that bit at the end of all our meetings when you say thanks very much for coming and safe journey home. Get your diaries out like that. It was just all a bit messy, isn't it?
got something else you'd rather we said? Something a little more concise?
You know, I was just thinking, maybe we could just say Heil and then my name.
Heil Adolf Hitler?
No, just Heil Hitler. Well, it is quicker. Maybe we should have a vote on it. That's not really key. Not with the whole fascism thing going on. Well then, we'll certainly never be stuck for an icebreaker, will we? Save a lot of time at work in the mornings. Imagine how much more efficient that will make the soft drinks industry. Brave, ladies and gentlemen, brave Adolf Hitler there. Now, I don't want you to think, of course, that because I started my show by talking about the bravery and the courage of Adolf Hitler. In that one respect, I don't want you to think that I love Hitler. I don't love Hitler. But I'm not in love with him. You know what I mean, girls. I mean, he's a married man. And on the 30th of April 1945, he took cyanide, shot himself in the head. His body was dragged out to the yard outside his bunker, where it was burnt with petrol, discovered by the oncoming Russian Red Army, who then buried it in an unmarked grave in the Magdeburg forest, where it remained until 1970, when Yuri Andropov, the then head of the KGB, fearing that the site may become a shrine to neo-Nazis, had the bones exhumed again, burned again, crushed to dust, and scattered into an unnamed tributary of the River Elbe. So if I said I was waiting for him, I'd be being a fool to myself. You know what I mean, girls. But no, I'm sorry, of course I'm not in any way a fascist sympathiser. I hope that's clear. That's just my striking opening there. I hope you can probably tell by the fact that I look like a twat that I'm in fact quite left-wing. What they call a cider socialist. Like a champagne socialist, but, you know, on a budget. Quite right on in my views, I support equal marriage, even though I'm not gay myself. It did come as a bit of a disappointment to my husband. But, you know, I told him, I had to make a stand. He shouldn't have to worry his pretty little head about it. But, no, seriously, I can't stand those right-wing groups, the EDL, the BNP, you know, the angry, red-faced men who don't so much have heads as domed extensions to their neck, their whole faces bloodshot with rage because they've seen a samosa on a Wetherspoons menu. I hate those people, I do. I used to take it too far, I suppose. I did used to take it too far, because I used to think I don't want to be around those people, I don't want to be near those people. I even used to think that they should have to use a separate area at railway stations. Then I realised that I'd just be giving a platform to racists. And that joke is there, ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know that whatever political beliefs I may espouse, I will eventually sell them out for a cheap punchline. Alright? It's okay, it's just to keep you going. Again, it's an interesting one. I think, you have to look at the 20th century as a time of tremendous upheaval. I'm sorry to have started with the Nazis, of course. It's just that, I like to get the Nazis out of the way early on. Unlike the Americans. A little bit of jingoistic tribalism there, just to measure the nationalism of the room. It's nice, isn't it? It's nice to have those calling cards to hang on to. I don't know. I'm sorry to kind of leave them behind there, but I'm sure they'll be back. In the show, not in government. They have laws against that now. In Germany, Here we'll just have to wait and see how good Nigel Farage looks in uniform. It's a very green overcoat that he's got, isn't it? I don't know. It is nice to have these little calling cards to hang on to. Cards that very much shuffled in the passage of the 20th century. We had countries are created, empires disappear, the largest mass migrations in history. Poland is shifted 300 miles to the left. Just looks better there. But it becomes easier to characterise the 20th century as nothing but conflict, genocide, and the roving, unchecked fallacies of the light entertainment stars of my youth. It was so much more than that. It gave us civil rights, feminism, and the invention of the gastropub. Fidel Castro. Still don't know how to say that. But the 20th century answered some of the definitive questions. Which is best? Violence or non-violence? Now, the two greatest exponents of non-violence, of course, were the Mahatma, Mohandas Gandhi, and Martin Luther King Jr., both assassinated using a violence. Now, of course, so it would seem, as scissors beats paper, violence beats non-violence. Of course, as we know, scissors, paper, stone is best of three. At which point I would then proffer the assassination of peace-loving hipster and competent rhythm guitarist John Winston Lennon. Also killed by violence. Though, of course, it was the assassination of John Lennon that also directly led to Paul McCartney's reticence to tour for a number of years and the immediate breakup of Wings. It's not the immediate defeat for music that it may first have seen. Again, I suppose I've always been fascinated by history. I have always been fascinated by history, largely because I find it easier to relate to people who aren't alive. They're a lot less unpredictable than the rest of you air-breathing calamities. But it wasn't always modern history. It wasn't always 20th century history that interested me. I studied ancient history. I always preferred something of a finer vintage on history. I was a bit snobby, I suppose, about modern history, thinking it was all just weird-looking guys going on too much about Hitler. How wrong I was. Now that changed for me at a very important time in my life. You see, very good, very wise friend of mine pointed out that a drunk man in a pub will always do one of two things. He will always try and start a fight with the bouncer, or he will try and hit on the barmaid. Drawn by inextricable, tragic force to the only two sober people in the building, thereby greatly reducing his chances of success in either enterprise. And I was really taken with this notion, this idea. It was a kind of like an exemplar of the human condition. That it was both our blessing and our curse, always to be striving for something that would ultimately remain unobtainable. My mate said, "No, Mike, it's just an anecdote about growing up in Stockport." And I said, "But surely aren't we all at heart just drunks disastrously chatting up the barmaid?" And he said, "No, Mike, you are just a drunk disastrously chatting up the barmaid." And for a time, ladies and gentlemen, he was right. Of course, in my long and inglorious history of failing to impress female employees within the hospitality industry, I of course used my one strength. The one thing that was open to me, of course, was history. A very simple system, almost deceptively so, was my only weapon in the war of love. I'd get my round in. That would be 1571, please. Just in time for the Battle of Lepanto, I'd add, quick as a flash. And if I had to go back to help carry extra drinks, I could just kind of ease it in, which was a naval engagement between the Ottoman Empire and a series of European maritime states led by Venice. Just to keep the conversation going. I don't know if any of you have tried it. It does work for any situation. Of course, just a quiet pint by yourself, that'll be £3.62. The Emperor Julian the Apostate enters Antioch. Work drinks, maybe with colleagues who you don't really like but feel obliged to socialise with, that'll be £16.53, please. Oliver Cromwell expels Parliament. 146 BC, the Romans conquer Greece. Although there may be something wrong with your till. But then disaster struck. As the Sam Smith's chain of pubs jacked up their prices. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the Sam Smith's chain of pubs. I'm hoping that you are a lot, because this will become relevant. But if you don't know them, there are quite a lot of Sam Smith's pubs in the north of England, and of course there are quite a lot of them here in London, where for a long time they were an absolute lifeline to people with my lifestyle, that of the cash-conscious volume drinker. Now, the reason they were able to keep their prices low, of course, was because Sam Smith's pubs only offered their own range of drinks, their own very fine range of ales and beers, in their own increasingly unlikely selection of spirits and mixers. Anybody who has ever enjoyed a large imperious vodka with cola-style drink. So there I am on the worst day of my life. I get my round in. That'll be 1954, please. Thank you very much, and by the way, your hair looks nice. Oh, thank you, and why don't you buy me a drink when I finish my shift in half an hour? Don't patronise me, that's not the point! And from then on, ladies and gentlemen, from that point forward, I knew that I would have to learn 20th century history.